I'm producing this video as an answer to those people who've commented and asked me and emailed me, what is the worst that could happen between now and 2024? I mean, why should I worry, is what they've said. And I have to tell you that this is in no way any sort of prophecy. This is simply an answer to that question, what is the worst that can happen due to the little ice age, the solar minimum, and other factors that currently we know are occurring on this planet before 2024. So let's have a look. It's going to be depressing, I'm afraid. So 2018, next year. The Earth's core rotation is slowing, which is prompting a lot of scientists to give warnings of increased volcanic activity and increased earthquake activity. Now, the worst thing that could happen is actually not for Yellowstone to pop. Yellowstone would certainly be the worst for America, but the worst for the whole planet would be if the Italian supervolcano near Naples were to go, because that would blanket the whole of the northern hemisphere in ash due to the actual patterns of the jet stream that would produce a volcanic winter across most of the world. Now, there would be no summer in the northern hemisphere if this was to happen, and the average temperatures in the northern hemisphere could plummet by as much as 12 degrees. Obviously that's going to affect things like air flight, it's going to make the winter a lot deeper, and going to cause an enormous number of problems and a huge number of deaths. 2019, and now there's more volcanic activity due to the increased stresses in the crust, and it starts to produce more sulfur dioxide and more dust in the atmosphere, and this deepens the whole volcanic winter effect. So we have a second year of volcanic winter. Ice starts to knock out the power grid, and this is because most of the world's power grids have external contacts that are opened or closed in the event of an emergency, and these can easily be iced up. It's a lot cheaper to produce these, especially if your climate is like that in California, than it is a fully enclosed system. Now, after the power grid goes off, gas supplies and water supplies follow around about a month later, and this is because in the developed world most of the gas and water supplies have fail-safe valves that are operated electrically. Now, these valves have rechargeable batteries, but the batteries only last for around about a month to 6 weeks. So their last action before they lose the last bit of power is to fail safe, which means closed, which means no water, which means no gas. Now, this obviously is going to cause even more problems and more deaths. Around the equator, during the summer in the southern hemisphere and winter in the north, permanent high winds and storms begin to develop, and this is due to the temperature difference, the increased temperature difference between the summer in the south, which is almost normal, and the winter in the northern hemisphere, which is absolutely abominable. And this obviously makes transport almost impossible from north to south or south to north in the world. 2020, Earth loses the solar system lottery, and one of the largest CMEs ever seen hits, wiping out many satellites. And the magnetic expansion, the Earth's magnetic field, which is a natural consequence of a CME, slows the orbits of the existing satellites. GPS, television, and many telecoms companies are worried that they're going to lose their satellites. The storm patterns around the equator and the normal launch areas where rockets are actually sent up from make the launching replacement satellites impossible. Most countries in the world experience famine. International travel becomes almost impossible worldwide, and of course the winter deepens. 2021 to 2024. Mass migration from north to south has built up to enormous levels because people have worked out that the people in the southern hemisphere are having a much better time of it than the people in the north. Arctic ice, meanwhile, has built up to record levels, and Antarctic ice has done exactly the opposite and continued melting. The continued slowing of the core has produced more stresses in the crust. Due to imbalanced weight, a crustal slip event occurs, and within a week North America is where the Antarctic is now. Antarctica is almost on the equator, with the North Pole opposite it. The oceans slop. Major earthquakes flatten all the cities of the world. 80% of humanity will not survive this event. The Earth's magnetic field is further weakened, and more radiation, which creates even more clouds, and this produces a worldwide dimming of the now even less active sun and locks the planet into a new long-term ice age. It will be hundreds of thousands of years before the Earth warms up again to where it is now. What is left of humanity exists in a pre-medieval state of technology, and by the time the Ice Age lifts, there will be barely a trace of their previous accomplishments. So that was a bleak story, but it's what you asked me for. You asked me what is the worst that can happen, and I feel I must have a word about crustal slip. Now, this has been a theory which is now gaining even more traction since it was proposed during the time of Einstein, and we have to remember that Einstein was a great proponent of crustal slip. He felt it was the only way to explain the fact that the mammoths were being found in Siberia with their stomachs full of subtropical plants. Now we find that Antarctica was once in the tropics. In fact, Antarctica, looking at the plant records, the fossil records, was once at the equator. And what else could do that other than crustal slip? Now, if the crust does slip to that extent, it's going to happen reasonably rapidly. It's going to take about a week or so, and when it stops, the oceans, which are water, are going to carry on moving. So there will be vast walls of water being pushed across the land. People will survive if they're on mountain tops, perhaps. So nearly all of the world's population will be wiped out, and this has happened before. How do we know this? We know this from genetic records, because looking at mitochondrial DNA, we know that the human population was at one time down to 1 woman and possibly 9 or 10 males. What other sort of thing could cause this? Anyway, I hope you found this video depressing and useful though, and if you have, please like, share and subscribe, and I'll talk to you about something more cheerful soon. Thank you very much.